So they were designed more than half a century ago as a area dispersal munitions that could be deployed from a canister, spread out little toy-shaped and sized bomblets that could affect a major area that could be used for clearing terrain, clearing jungles, clearing minefields and things like that. The problem has been the very high failure rate. So in the Vietnam War, for instance, there was between 40 and 80% failure rate of these bomblets, and many of them remain, millions of them remain littered through Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam to this day. So that generated a real backlash, a sense that it was really a travesty that these weapons of war had a lingering effect well after war, with many children attracted to the colourful and toy-shaped objects being killed or maimed as a result of this. So it really did seem an appropriate response for the world to ban it, but several countries didn't, including the great powers, the United States, China, Russia, India, Pakistan and Israel, amongst others, including Ukraine, of course.
Yeah. President Biden said the decision wasn't taken lightly. Why do you think he landed on the side of providing these to Ukraine?
So the United States has, as I say, didn't sign up to the ban, and they have been refining their technology. So they have argued that they have brought down the failure rate down to about 1%. But of course, that's in laboratory conditions, and there is a real fear that that technology still is very unreliable. But we have the problem: the United States has actually finding itself shortchanged in terms of conventional munitions, and the Ukrainians seeking to break through, layer upon layer of Russian defences, are looking to use these to try and clear a barrier through. So it's an understandable response. The Americans are saying it's a lot more reliable. Skeptics abound, of course, with good reason. And the Ukrainians, understandably, are desperate for anything that will just give them the edge. Mindful, of course, that we've held back and delayed the supply of other types of equipment. So they haven't got the ATACMS, the Army Tactical Missile System, that goes on the back of the HIMARS, the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, that they've already deployed. They haven't got the F-16s yet. They've got tanks in short numbers. So they've all sorts of constraints on Ukrainian prowess that this is, I think, partly meant to try to mitigate the effects of.
Yeah. Russia, have they been using these cluster bombs during this invasion?
So the reports indicate that they have been using them. It's certainly part of their repertoire. And there were significant reports of large numbers of these being used, particularly in the early days. So there's no question that this is not just one-sided. And this is the other thing. You tie the Ukrainians' hand behind their back, because if the Russians are using them, it's not banned in Russia. It's not banned elsewhere. Why should we do it to them? Of course, that's a very open question.
Indeed. Will Ukraine be tempted to use these in Russian territory?
So, yes, of course, they'll be tempted. But so far, they've been pretty conscientious in complying with the directions from the United States and other allies to geographically restrain the application of some of these technologies that they've been provided with. So the bottom line is the key terrain that they need to use this is in the defended belts that are in sovereign Ukrainian territory. They're not too worried about going beyond that. For this counteroffensive to be effective, it has to happen within Ukrainian territory. So that's really not too much of a concern.
Yeah. And if that accuracy rate, as you point out, has not been improved, they leave a minefield for their own people by using these bombs.
And of course, while the Americans claim that the new ones have a much higher success rate, chances are the ones that they would be supplied would be probably old stock, probably the ones that have a very high failure rate. So you're right, it's a real problem. And because the bomblets tend to be very attractive, they're meant to be obvious to be able to detect subsequently if they don't go off. But the problem is that, they're very attractive items. People mistakenly stumble across them and think it's a little trinket, and before you know it, you're losing a limb.
Yeah. Given there is so much objection from other countries, what fallout might there be for President Biden at the NATO summit?
So this is an interesting one, because while there's a lot of countries like Australia interested in holding the line on our agreement to ban the use of these weapons, the Ukrainians, I think, have a fair case to argue that, well, look, if you're going to ban this, why don't you accelerate supply of other critical military equipment and munitions to enable us to get on with the fight? And I think that's not an unreasonable position for them to argue. And so it is with that in mind, I suspect that the Albanese government and the Prime Minister is probably going to go with a little bit more on offer. And of course, we have a number of options there up our sleeve.
Yeah. Great to talk to you as always, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Beck.